So with that said, what I'd like to do now is open this up for questions, both for Clark Kooning, both Dave Schultz, Nick Massey, Brian Schilling, and Jim Murphy. If you have any questions about the build-alongs that they're working on, please ask them. So if you have questions, now's the time.
I have a question.
I don't see a hand raising. I don't see anybody out there.
All right, here we go. Hey, Nickster, actually, I don't know if Brian's still with us. Brian, oh, there you are. What color of yellow were you using on that building?
So I kind of have a collection of them right now, just because any brick building that's been yellow that I've come across. Now, I think you've seen my Seagrams.
Yeah.
I also had my Krug Furniture Factory, and then I had Olympia. Seagrams is obviously replicated after the Seagrams buildings in Kitchener-Waterloo. The Krug Furniture Factory was a furniture factory that was in Chesley, Ontario. They had very similar kind of colors. So what I found was that there's some yellow, but it's almost, some of it's so faded to gray. So I couldn't really find a color that made sense, other than you have to kind of go with the yellow and then fade it down with weathering and stains and stuff like that.
Got it.
But what I have kind of come with is yellow ochre, is because there are some orangey kind of color tones in there.
Okay.
And then I really was liking this folk art sunflower
Okay.
as kind of largely what I used, but that one I can't find anymore. So the closest thing that I've been able to find to it right now is this, it's folk art, but it's Daybreak. And I have a feeling they just stopped making sunflower, because they tend to do this with these paints, is all of a sudden the color is gone and something else, but it's generally similar or the same one.
Yeah, just a different name.
And then
the assumption is you'll buy the new name, even though it's the same color.
Yeah, and it's like, because I'm using small amounts of this at a time, like even with dry brushing, even though you do kind of use more because you're putting some paint down on a paper towel before you're doing it, you're still using this stuff kind of sparingly. So a bottle will last me a while type thing. And then when I go, it's like, okay, they've changed product name again. So what I typically do with these kind of Michaels or whatever your local establishment is that carries this type of stuff is I'll do like a paint swatch of colors if I'm looking for replacements, and then I'll take that with me. So that way, when I'm in the store, I'm cracking these things open, because I always crack open the bottles just because I never trust the color that's on the label, so to speak. And then you can kind of see, okay, that makes sense that that's within the color. The good thing about doing this kind of thing is I'm never doing a building that, well, actually, I'll take that back. I did the Grimsby Station as if it was a brand new building, just because that was the choice I went as going for a building that was having its grand opening, so to speak. But every other building, it's the paint's worn or the brick is, got a little bit of age to it. Even if you're not doing heavy aging to it, no brick building is a perfect color.
Right.
So you can get away with a lot more in that.
Okay. Well, that gives me a good idea. I've got several shades of yellow. I believe I got some yellow.
Yeah.
So
I was wondering if the buttermilk might work.
It's totally up to what you see. Like if you've got a building that you're actually modeling that has this, the best thing you can do is you take pictures of the building ideally take it on a cloudy day, not like a dark cloud, but like just an overcast day, because now you're not getting the like the hot spots of the sun. You're kind of getting an actual kind of a consistent color or consistent light, then you can kind of, if you take pictures of sections of that brick, you use that as your benchmark for what you're trying to shoot for. I don't have a magic formula. I just kind of shoot for, okay, that's the color roughly that I'm seeing on the building, and I'll play with things and layer it until I kind of get what I'm happy with.
Yeah, no, and that's for sure. And
But that's why I also like the dry brushing technique, is you're not applying like a heavy color right away. You can kind of build to a color,
yeah,
and you can tone things in with that.
Yeah.
But I'll have to say, like the red brick with the spray, like that works really well too. So it's not like I would go exclusively, this is the only technique I'll ever use. In fact, I tend to kind of mix up techniques as I go through different buildings, just because it's interesting to try different things that way.
well, yeah. And now I may have missed it. I think you did mention it. Is the whole piece sprayed the gray and then you mask it off to do the yellow?
I typically do that, yes.
Yeah, so, okay.
So this building is different. It's, sorry, Nick, it's not an ITLA, but it was a plaster kit.
Yeah, I
But-
got that one, yeah.
So spraying all the brick lines and everything, like
Yeah.
spraying it gives you all the brick lines, then dry brushing over kind of
Got it.
builds, because this has the depth. But the
Yeah.
great thing about the ITLA kits is they have the depth in the brick lines
Yeah.
that you can really get a nice detail or like popping of the
Yeah.
colors.
Yep, got it. Okay, cool. Thanks for the info.
No problem.
Brian, let me try to follow up a little bit. I've always had trouble with yellow. Every time I tried to use it, it's a problem for me.
Yeah.
What's your trick? What is your trick? What is your tip for using yellow paint on anything?
Don't eat yellow snow.
Never eat the yellow snow. That's a Canadian thing for sure.
Canadian.
Or use
Um,
yellow snow to stain the building.
No, I'm going to say that you have to have an intent on any building you're going to do. Now, if you're making up a building, or it's a building that it's not a building, it's just a building type thing, you're still better off to get pictures of buildings in your area or the area that you're modeling, whatever it may be, so that you can use that as the basis for achieving the color and the tones. Like I was saying with the Seagram kit, I designed the kit, Nick cut it for me type thing, but I had very clear definition of what those buildings were going to look like finish wise and everything, because I had a lot of history with those. If you don't have that, a lot of times it's like, okay, I want to do a red brick building, but if you don't really know what a red brick looks like, or what typically red brick buildings look like, you're just going to kind of, it's going to be red, but it's not going to be lifelike. So when it comes to something like a yellow building, I find that you kind of have to go with the grouts as a darker color, even though they probably aren't, just because it's going to give you that defined edge of the brick. And then you're building up the color. And with a dry brushing technique, it's easy to build up the color because you can go slow at it. And I won't lie, if you're going to go the dry brush technique, it's a longer methodology. Like I probably take longer on a kit if I go that way. But if it's the way to achieve the result with yellow, I've never been able to sit there and go, okay, I'm going to spray paint this building like I would with a red brick in yellow and gotten the same way result. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same. Whereas the red brick, like I was showing with the one thing here, I was shocked how much that toned down after I had spray painted with the red oxide. I was like, okay, I'm trusting you, Nick. and he's not lying, because if you go to his website, they have a lot of stuff like this. Now, if you look at closely at a lot of the models they do, it's not just red. There's a lot of oranges and stuff like that. So I think any good model is based off of somewhere there's the reality of a picture to use as your basis.
Gotcha.
Now, I work in an architectural industry, so I get exposure to a lot of that stuff on a daily basis. So I feel like I can probably pull a little bit out of my head, but if that's not what you're comfortable with, having those pictures and just slowly building up, maybe a dry brush technique with yellow would make more sense than a flat paint. But having said that, you know, maybe you can try with a stain and do the washes. You just do a darker wash. That'll tone down the yellows as well.
When you do your dry brushing with the yellow, do you put the brush in the full paint? I mean,
Yep.
you don't.
I
And
actually basically shake up the bottle, undo the top, and there's that little bit of paint in there, and I'll just kind of hold that in my hand type thing. I'll dab the brush in, then I'll have like a paper towel or something like that, and I'll just wipe it until there's not much left on it. And I'll practice on a couple things. If I haven't done it in a while, I'll practice on a couple things for a few strokes just to get my feel back, so to speak. But I'm not going to get a lot of color on the first time. And then I'm going to come back at it and I'm going to build up colors. And I found the biggest trick with doing the brick is never going horizontal or vertical following grout lines. Go on an angle, because then your brush isn't going into the grout lines. So that's probably the biggest trick I can give you on dry brush technique that I've learned, is you obviously light on the paint, but you want to go on an angle to the brick lines, because that way the brush itself doesn't go down in those grout lines and fill up with paint.
Fantastic.
Take your time and mask if you need to. Definitely mask if you need to.
Thank you.
No problem.
Anybody else have any questions?
I have a generic question that has to do with buildings. Because I remember when back when I was very short, the building that I was living in, it was a yellow building. A yellow brick well, it was a red brick building, but it was painted yellow. How would anyone I'll open this to anybody how would you sort of like duplicate that being slightly run down, where maybe the paint might be showing some of the red brick through it and stuff like that?
You might paint it red, then you might paint it yellow. Like you could dry brush the yellow over, and in areas you go heavier so that you get the full paint effect. In other areas you go lighter so that the red shows through, so it's like the paint spalling off. I've done something similar to that on a wood building where the paints come off and you're getting that kind of worn wood below. I'll do kind of the stain, and then I'll dry brush the paint on. But because the stain still shows through, it looks like the paint's peeling off. I know people do other techniques for that, but I find that that's been successful as a way to go. But you could do the exact same kind of idea with that, or you paint it with the red, and then you paint it with the yellow lightly, and then you start lightly sanding it so that the yellow is coming off and the red's coming through. You can play with that as possible technique too. I know Nick's done that technique for having bricks become way toned down, like they are spalling or the effervescence, I think they call it, is starting to come through on the brick. So it's a way to do it where you kind of actually have to create the red brick below it, and then you're kind of covering it up and then kind of bringing it off a bit.
I can, if you let me share quickly one picture, I'll show you what Brian's talking about. It may not, Ed, it may not be exactly what you're speaking to, but it's the same, I think the same idea. So let me, if I can, show you a picture from my website that is part of one of the how-to articles. Can you
That's the
see
one.
this? Yeah, can you see this photo? So basically this wall section was just spray painted, the red oxide primer that Brian referred to earlier. And all we sometimes tend to do is just kind of rub off a little bit of that paint with a sanding stick. And that way you get the natural wood color showing through, which happens to be like a yellow brick. So it's a bit of an inverse of what you're asking, but that idea could work for you too.
Yeah, sometimes you have to build up to take off
Yeah,
to replicate that kind of effect.
yeah. So good
And-
question though, Ed. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I've never tried that on any brick building, but it would be interesting to see it. Because there are all sorts of those buildings that I see around where people have painted over the original brickwork and then it's just gone to hell type thing because the moisture and whatever that gets in behind the brick and everything is just popping all the paint.
All right, thank you.
Is
Yeah.
James Schultz available?
Jim, it's David Schultz. I don't know whether James is his son. I don't know whether James is here or not.
I'm here, but is my dad on?
I see David Schultz here.
Yeah,
Oh,
He's
yeah.
muted.
Yeah,
he
is
is.
Dave available? Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
So what is your question?
Well, I'm having trouble deciding where the part begins in these stringy things. Am I supposed to be pulling out all these strings?
On the back sides of like the car sides, yeah, you'll see some of the stringy things. I'd just leave those in there. If they're sticking up, if they're interfering, you can cut them away. But yeah, like on the back side of some of the car sides, you'll see what looks like rows of fish line, and that's just fine. As long as they're in there solid, and they usually are, they're not going to bother anything. So on the
Okay.
car side itself, if you got, like say, those hairs in there, you just take one of those curved blades, you go around and you can just scrape those away, or you can use the wire brush technique that I use to get rid of that looks like spider webbing on the front.
Yeah.
But
All right.
the car side itself looks like it's got streaks in it, but once you spray primer on it, none of that shows through. So it's just strictly like an optical illusion, or the lines are so minute that once you spray primer, it fills it all in. So you're not going to have a problem with the car itself looking like a series of strings.
Yeah, I took out those cast-in grab irons, and one of them started peeling off a layer of the car side.
Oh,
It's
yeah, I
like
haven't had that happen.
it's like stringy stuff.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I haven't had any of that happen on mine. If it does tear away, you can use a little squadron green to fill it in. If it's a big part, you can glue that piece back in. Sharp blades really help with cutting those pieces off so they don't hang. They tend to hang on to each other, so you got to cut that stuff away. But
Okay.
Just a side comment, when you cut that, if you're cutting literally with the progression of the printer, it's different than if you're cutting in a 90 across each of those strands. And so if you don't get cut very well across them and you pull, they can tend to pull up. Think about string cheese. If you tear a string cheese apart and how that's literally what it's like inside there. They're bonded as a strand, and then they don't bond as well to the next strand. So one direction, there's a lot of adhesion across-wise. The other, there's a lot less, especially in long, thin parts, like those floors where there's a lot of linear print.
Yeah, it's diagonal on the car side, and it tore up a piece, maybe about a 1/4 inch.
But you gotta make just absolutely sure you're cut through everything before you start trying to pull it off, because otherwise it'll peel back like that.
All right.
Yep.
And the one other question is on the ends. We're basically supposed to sand all of these lines off the braces, the car end. They're stringy. They're
Right, and that's where that wire brush came in handy to rub that out. And amazingly enough, when I first grabbed it, I was going very light with it because I thought it was going to scratch the surface of stuff. But amazingly enough, you can bear down on that brush pretty well, and that removes a lot of that spider webbing that you see on there.
and the at the ends of those. I don't know. There's a bar across it that really looks like it might be part of the part, but
Yeah,
basically these should
it
be
wraps
just
around
hemispheres.
that bar wraps around the car side. So yeah, you don't want to sand that off. If you do, you do, but you don't. You try to avoid that. But the stuff is really pretty tough. Removing the flashing is a little bit of a trick because if you press too hard or you rub too hard, it just tends to melt. It doesn't
Yes.
tend to sand off like styrene would. So you have to kind of one stroke at a time, just kind of take it lightly, and eventually you'll work through it and get it off of there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, I certainly appreciate everybody being here this evening. Thanks so much for all of the people that presented the build along features tonight. Well, I really appreciate that. And I think all of you did a fantastic job. So thank you so much. And we'll look forward to seeing the continuation of those these build alongs.